Polaroids in the walls. I was 12 years old in the summer of 1998, and I had a mouth that would make sailors blush. My mom blamed it on the kids I hung out with, Tyler, Marcus, and Jesse. We were the neighborhood shits, the ones who threw rocks at stop signs and stole candy from the gas and go. Not bad kids, really. Just bored kids in a nothing town in rural Pennsylvania. That's how we ended up in the Brenner house that night. The place had been empty since before I was born. 3 stories of peeling paint and broken windows sitting on Quarry Road like a rotten tooth. Every kid in town knew the stories. Old man Brenner went crazy, killed his whole family, blah, blah, blah. Standard abandoned house bullshit. It was Jesse's idea to go inside. Said his older brother found cool stuff in there once. Old coins, antique bottles. We figured we might find something worth selling. Maybe score enough cash for the new Tony Hawk game. We went on a Friday night in July. I told my mom I was sleeping at Tyler's. She barely looked up from her crossword puzzle when she said, "Okay." Dad was working late again at the plant. He'd been working late a lot that summer. The house smelled like wet newspapers and something else, sweet and chemical, like the dark room in my uncle's basement. We had flashlights from the dollar store, the kind that ate through batteries like candy. The beams kept flickering, making shadows jump on the walls. "This is creepy," Marcus whispered. "Don't be a pussy," I said, even though my hands were shaking. We explored the first floor, empty rooms with water-stained walls, a kitchen with cabinets hanging off their hinges. Found nothing but mouse shit and old phone books. The second floor had 4 bedrooms, all empty except for a mattress, so moldy it looked like it was growing fur. Then Tyler found the attic door. It was painted over, almost invisible against the hallway wall, but the paint was bubbled and peeling, and when Tyler pushed on it, it swung open with a sound like breaking bones. The smell hit us immediately. Stronger up here, chemical and sweet and wrong. And underneath it, something else, like copper pennies, like blood. "I'm out," Jesse said. But I was already climbing the narrow stairs because I'd seen something, a glint of metal in my flashlight beam. When I reached the attic, I understood why the smell was so strong. The walls were covered in photographs, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all Polaroids, all pinned to the walls with rusty thumbtacks. They overlapped like scales, covering every inch of the space. "Holy shit," Tyler breathed behind me. I stepped closer, my flashlight beam playing across the photos. They were all of people, families mostly, parents and kids, smiling at picnics, standing in front of houses, sitting around dinner tables, normal photos. Except, "Dude, look at their eyes," Marcus said. In every photo, the subject's eyes had been scratched out, carefully, precisely, just the eyes. Nothing else was damaged. "We should go," Jesse said from the stairs. "We should go right fucking now." But I'd noticed something else. In the corner, barely visible under a pile of more loose photos, was a box. An old shoebox, held shut with twine. I don't know why I grabbed it. Maybe because I was 12 and stupid. Maybe because I wanted to prove I wasn't scared. The second I touched it, the smell got stronger. And I heard something, or felt it, like a vibration in the air, like someone humming just below the range of hearing. I remember Tyler asking what was in it. I pulled off the twine and opened the box. More Polaroids. But these were different. These were all of the same family. A man, a woman, 2 kids, a boy and a girl. The photos showed them over years. Birthdays, Christmases, first days of school, a normal family. Except in each progressive photo, something was wrong. In the early ones, they looked happy, normal. But as I flipped through them, their smiles became forced. Their eyes looked tired, haunted. And in the last few photos, they weren't looking at the camera at all. They were looking at something behind it. All of them, even in different photos, taken in different places. They were all looking at the same spot behind the photographer. Guys, Jesse's voice was shaking. There's someone downstairs. We froze. Sure enough, from somewhere below came the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Window, Tyler hissed. Fire escape. We scrambled for the attic window. It was painted shut, but fear gave us strength. Tyler and I threw our shoulders against it until it burst open. We tumbled onto the rusty fire escape, the metal groaning under our weight. As we climbed down, I looked back at the attic window. A figure stood there, backlit by our abandoned flashlights. I couldn't see features, just a silhouette, but I could see what it was holding. A camera, an old Polaroid camera. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs shook. Ran until we reached Tyler's house and locked ourselves in his basement. We stayed up all night, jumping at every sound. I kept the shoebox. Don't ask me why. I hid it under my bed and tried to forget about it. But I couldn't forget the photos, especially the family. Something about them nagged at me, something familiar. 3 days later, I was home alone. Mom was at her book club. Dad was working late again. I pulled out the shoebox and spread the photos on my bedroom floor. That's when I saw it. In one of the photos, a Christmas morning shot, there was a clock on the wall. One of those cat clocks with the moving tail. We had the same clock in our kitchen, same crack in the plastic face and everything. My hands were shaking as I looked closer at the other photos. The couch in the birthday photo. Same ugly floral pattern as the one in our basement. The wallpaper in the kitchen shots. Same yellow daisies my mum always complained about. These photos were taken in my house. I ran downstairs to our family photo albums. Mum kept them in the hall closet, organized by year. I pulled out the oldest one, from before I was born. The resemblance was undeniable. The man in the Polaroids looked exactly like my dad, just younger. Same nose, same way of standing with his weight on his left foot. But it couldn't be him. My dad was an only child, and this man had 2 kids in the photos. I heard the front door open, Dad's voice calling out that he was home. I shoved the photos back in the box and ran to my room. But I kept one, the clearest shot of the family. I needed to know. At dinner, I watched my dad, really watched him, the way he cut his meat, the way he rubbed his jaw when he was thinking. All familiar, all exactly like the man in the photos. Dad, I said, trying to sound casual, did we ever live in another house? Before this one? He froze, fork halfway to his mouth. No, sport. You were born in this house. What about before I was born? Mum and Dad exchanged a look. One of those parent looks that means they're deciding how much to tell you. We've always lived here, Mum said, firmly. Why are you asking? I shrugged and changed the subject. But that night, I heard them arguing in hushed voices. I couldn't make out the words, but I heard Mum crying. Over the next few weeks, I became obsessed. I snuck into the attic when they were gone, looking for evidence. Found nothing. Checked the basement. Nothing. But I did notice something weird. There were marks on the basement floor, scratches, like something heavy had been dragged repeatedly. And the smell, that sweet chemical smell from the Brenner house. Sometimes I'd catch a whiff of it in our house, usually near the basement door. One night, I decided to follow my dad. He'd said he was working late again, but something felt off. I told Mom I was going to Tyler's, then hid in the bushes outside. At 9 p.m., Dad's car pulled into the driveway. He wasn't supposed to be home until midnight. He went inside, and a few minutes later, came back out carrying a box. He put it in the trunk and drove off. I followed on my bike, staying far enough back that he wouldn't see me. He drove to the industrial district to a storage facility. I watched from behind a dumpster as he unlocked a unit and went inside. He was in there for an hour. When he came out, he wasn't carrying anything, but his clothes were different. The shirt he'd been wearing was gone, replaced by one I didn't recognize. I waited until his car was out of sight, then crept to the storage unit. The lock was one of those combination types. I tried his birthday, my birthday, Mom's birthday. Nothing. Then on a hunch, I tried the date from the oldest Polaroid. The lock clicked open. The smell hit me like a physical force, chemical and sweet, and underneath, that copper penny scent. I pulled my shirt over my nose and went inside. The unit was full of boxes, dozens of them, all labeled with dates. I opened the nearest one, Polaroids, hundreds of them, all showing my dad with a woman who wasn't my mum, and 2 kids, a boy and a girl, the same family from the Brenner house photos. But these were different. These showed what happened after. The photos were dated, written on the white borders in neat handwriting. They showed the family getting sicker, thinner, the kids' hair falling out, the woman in a hospital bed, then just my dad and the kids, then just my dad. The last photo in that box showed my dad standing in front of our house, alone. The date was 3 months before he met my mom. I opened another box, more photos. These showed my dad with my mom, their wedding, her pregnancy, me as a baby. But in every photo where I appeared, there were scratches. Not through the eyes like the Brenner house photos, but around me. Circles scratched around my body, like someone had tried to scratch me out but stopped. You weren't supposed to find these. I spun around. My dad stood in the doorway of the storage unit. His face was calm, but his eyes were wrong, empty, like the scratched out eyes in the photos. Dad, my voice cracked. I tried so hard to keep you safe, he said, to keep it from happening again. Keep what from happening? Dad, what the fuck is going on? He stepped into the unit, closing the door behind him. The photos. They're not just pictures. They're anchors, keeping things in place, keeping the sickness from spreading. What sickness? Dad, you're scaring me. He pulled out a Polaroid camera, the same kind from the Brenner house. It started when I was young, younger than you. I found something I shouldn't have, breathed something I shouldn't have. It got into me, into my family. He raised the camera. It took them from me, my first family, but I learned that if I documented it, captured it, I could contain it, transfer it. The flash went off. I couldn't see. The Brenner house was where I kept them. All the families I've saved, all the sickness I've pulled out and trapped in silver halide and chemicals. Another flash. But you found them, disturbed them, and now it's starting again. I can smell it on you. sweet and chemical. I tried to run, but he grabbed my arm. His grip was impossibly strong. I'm sorry, Sport. I'm so fucking sorry. But I can't lose another family. I won't. Flash, flash, flash. When my vision cleared, I was home, in my bed. Mum was shaking me, saying I'd had a nightmare. Dad was there too, looking concerned. Normal, but I could smell it. That sweet chemical smell, coming from my skin. That was 25 years ago. I'm 37 now, with a family of my own. A wife, 2 kids, a boy and a girl. And last week, my son asked me why I take so many pictures. I told him it's to preserve memories, to keep our family safe, to make sure nothing bad happens to them. He doesn't know about the storage unit I rent, about the boxes of Polaroids, about the other families I've had to document, to save. He doesn't know that every night I check his room, smell the air, look for signs, because it's starting again. That sweet chemical smell. And this time, it's coming from him. I found a shoebox under his bed yesterday. Inside were Polaroids, hundreds of them, all of our family, all with the eyes scratched out, all except his. In every photo, while our eyes are gouged away, his remain intact, watching. And in the white borders, in handwriting I don't recognize, someone has written, "The son becomes the father. The sickness comes home." I've started taking more pictures, boxes and boxes of them, trying to capture it, contain it, transfer it. But I can feel it growing, spreading. And I know, deep down, that I'm not saving anyone. I'm just feeding it. And someday, my son will stand in a storage unit, camera in hand, wondering how many families he'll have to go through before he finds one that the sickness won't take. The cycle continues. The photos multiply. And somewhere, in an abandoned house that isn't as empty as people think, something waits. Patient, hungry, collecting pictures of families with scratched out eyes, waiting for the next kid with a foul mouth and too much curiosity to come looking for treasure in the dark. The last drive to Copper Falls. My dad disappeared on November 14th, 2019. The police found his truck 3 days later, parked at a rest stop just outside Copper Falls, Montana. Population 847. The engine was still running. His coffee was still warm in the cup holder. But Dad was gone. I was the last person to see him alive. We'd taken that drive together. It started as a normal Thursday morning. Dad called me around 6 a.m., which wasn't unusual. He'd been an early riser since his army days. He needed to drive out to Copper Falls to look at some property. His buddy Marcus had left him 40 acres in his will, and Dad wanted to check it out before the winter storms hit. He asked me to come with him, said it was a 5-hour drive and we'd make a day of it. I almost said no. I had a deadline at work, emails piling up, but something in his voice made me pause. He sounded tired, older. Dad was 72, still sharp as a tack, but lately I'd noticed him forgetting little things, repeating stories. Maybe that's why I said yes. The drive up Highway 93 was beautiful that time of year. The larches had turned gold, standing out like torches against the dark pines. Dad drove his old F-150, the red one with 200,000 miles on it. We talked about normal things. My job, his garden, the Broncos' terrible season. About 3 hours in, just past Salmon Lake, Dad pulled off at a gas station. While he filled up, I grabbed us some coffee and noticed the attendant staring at our truck. He was an older guy, maybe 60, with deep-set eyes that didn't blink enough. He asked if we were headed north. When I told him Copper Falls, his expression changed. Just for a second, a tightening around his mouth. Then he asked if we were going to see Marcus Henley's land. I must have looked surprised, because he explained that it was a small town, word travels. He leaned in closer, and I could smell cigarettes on his breath. He wanted to know if my dad knew Marcus well. I told him they served together in Vietnam. The man nodded slowly and told me Marcus had come through last month, bought 5 gallons of kerosene, said he had to burn something. The attendant paused before adding that Marcus had said 40 years was long enough. Before I could ask what he meant, Dad honked the horn. I grabbed our coffees and left. The last 2 hours of the drive, Dad was quiet. Not unusual for him, but this felt different. He kept checking the rearview mirror. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. When I asked if he was okay, he said he was just thinking about Marcus, that he hadn't been out this way in 30 years. Copper Falls sits in a valley between 2 mountain ridges. You have to wind down through a series of switchbacks to reach it, and as we descended, I noticed the temperature drop. My phone lost signal around the same time we passed a faded sign. Welcome to Copper Falls, the heart of Big Sky Country. The town felt wrong immediately. It's hard to explain. The buildings were there, a general store, a diner, a post office, but it felt like a movie set. Too quiet, too still. We passed maybe 3 people on Main Street, and none of them looked up as we drove by. Dad knew exactly where to go. He turned off Main onto a dirt road without checking any directions. 5 miles out, past rusted mailboxes and abandoned farmhouses, he pulled up to a metal gate. A new chain and padlock secured it, but Dad had the key. The property was 40 acres of pine forest, with an old cabin in the center. The cabin looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Roof half collapsed, windows boarded up. But the ground around it was different. Fresh dirt, recently turned. And that smell, kerosene, just like the gas station attendant had mentioned. Dad stood at the edge of the disturbed earth for a long time. The afternoon sun was already sinking behind the mountains, and the temperature was dropping fast. I suggested we should go, but Dad was already walking toward the cabin. I followed, my boots crunching on frost-brittle grass. He pushed open the door. It wasn't locked, and we stepped inside. The cabin was empty except for 2 things: a metal filing cabinet in the corner and photographs. Hundreds of them, tacked to every wall, all black and white, all showing the same thing: bodies. They looked like crime scene photos. Young men in military uniforms lying in jungle mud. Some had visible wounds. Others just looked wrong. Their faces were twisted, mouths open, eyes wide with what looked like terror. In the center of the far wall was a map of Vietnam, marked with red X's. Below it, someone had written in shaky handwriting, "They followed us home." Dad was staring at one particular photo. His hand was shaking. He started naming them: Martinez, Johnson, Kowalski. His voice was barely a whisper when he told me they all died in '74. Car accidents, house fires, hunting accidents, all within 6 months of coming home. He turned to me, and I'd never seen him look so old. He said Marcus had called him last month, said he'd figured it out, said he knew why they died, why they were the only 2 left from their unit. Marcus had said he was going to end it. The sound came from outside. Footsteps on gravel, slow, deliberate. We both turned toward the door. Through the dirty window, I could see shapes moving between the trees. Multiple figures walking with an odd, jerky gait. Dad grabbed my arm. We needed to go, now. We ran. I've never seen my father move so fast. We jumped in the truck, and Dad gunned it in reverse, spinning gravel. As we turned, the headlights swept across the tree line. I saw them clearly for just a second. 5 figures in rotted military uniforms. Their faces were, I don't know how to describe it, like they were wearing masks of human faces that didn't quite fit. Dad drove faster than I'd ever seen him drive. We hit the main road doing 60 on dirt, 90 on asphalt. Neither of us spoke until we were 50 miles from Copper Falls. When I finally asked what those things were, Dad's jaw was clenched tight. He told me about 1973. Their unit was sent to clear a village called Duke Fo. Intelligence said it was empty, but it wasn't. The people there weren't right, weren't alive, weren't dead either. They burned it, the whole village. Marcus had the flamethrower. They thought that was the end of it. But after they got home, the others started dying, one by one. Marcus and Dad were the only ones left. We drove through the night. Dad dropped me at my apartment at 3 a.m. and said he needed to go home, get some sleep. I wanted to go with him, but he insisted he was fine. That was the last time I saw him. The police said there were no signs of struggle, no blood, no indication of where he'd gone. Security footage from the rest stop shows him pulling in at 4:47 a.m. At 4:52, the camera glitches, just static for 30 seconds. When it clears, the truck is still there, but Dad is gone. They found something else in his truck, something the police couldn't explain. On the passenger seat was an old military photograph, one I'd never seen before. It showed Dad's unit in Vietnam, all 12 of them, standing in front of a burned village. But in the background, barely visible in the smoke, were other figures, watching, waiting. The photo was dated November 14th, 1973, exactly 46 years before Dad disappeared. I've driven past that rest stop a dozen times since then, always during daylight. Sometimes I think about stopping, looking for some sign of what happened. But I always keep driving, because sometimes, late at night, I dream about those things we saw at Marcus's cabin. And in my dreams, they're not following Dad anymore. They're following me. And last week, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, all I heard was static. But underneath it, barely audible, was my father's voice. He told me not to come looking for him. Whatever I do, don't come looking. The line went dead. When I tried to call back, the number was disconnected. That was 7 days ago. And every night since, I've heard footsteps in the gravel outside my apartment. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. The Watcher of Willowbrook Lane. I need to tell someone about this. I found others online who've experienced the same thing, but we're all too scared to go public. Maybe if I share this here, anonymously, more people will come forward. It started this past April when I moved into my house on Willowbrook Lane. Nice suburban neighborhood in Ohio. Tree-lined streets, kids playing, people walking dogs. The American dream, right? I'd saved for years to afford the down payment, on that 3-bedroom colonial. My neighbor to the left, Mrs. Chen, brought me cookies on move-in day. The family on the right had 3 kids who immediately adopted my golden retriever as their best friend. Everyone was welcoming, except for the man in the house directly across the street, number 47, a beige split level with overgrown hedges and newspapers piling up on the driveway. The blinds were always drawn, except for one window on the 2nd floor, the window that faced my house. I first noticed him on my 3rd night there. I was unpacking boxes in my living room around 10 p.m. when I felt that sensation. You know, when you just know someone's watching you. I looked up and saw a figure in that 2nd floor window, just standing there, completely still. I waved, trying to be friendly. The figure didn't move, didn't wave back, just stood there. After about 30 seconds, I closed my curtains and tried to forget about it. New neighborhood, I told myself. People are curious about new neighbors. But it kept happening. Every night, between 10 p.m. and midnight, he'd be there. Sometimes I'd see him the moment I looked. Other times, I'd glance up from watching TV and jump because he was already standing there, had been standing there. Who knows how long? I asked Mrs. Chen about him one morning while she was gardening. She got this strange look on her face. Told me his name was Mr. Garrett. Been there about 15 years. Kept to himself. Then she leaned in close and said something that made my skin crawl. She said the previous owners of my house had moved out suddenly, middle of the night, left half their furniture. I pressed her for more information, but she just shook her head and went inside. The watching continued. Every single night. I started keeping my curtains closed, but I could still feel it. That presence, that weight of being observed. One night in early May, I'd had enough. At 10:15, instead of closing my curtains, I grabbed a flashlight and I walked straight out my front door. I was going to confront him. But when I reached his driveway, the 2nd floor window was empty, dark. I stood there for a minute, feeling foolish. Then I noticed something. His front door was open, not wide open, but cracked about 6 inches. I called out asking if everything was okay. No response. I took a few steps up his walkway and called out again. Said I was his neighbor from across the street. That's when I heard it. From inside the house. A sound like breathing. But not normal breathing. It was synchronized. Multiple people breathing in perfect unison. I ran back to my house and locked the door. The next day, I did something I should have done earlier. I Googled my address. What I found made me pack a bag and stay in a hotel for 3 nights. There was a forum, a private group called Willowbrook Watchers. Dozens of posts going back years, all from people who had lived in my house, or the house next door, or 3 houses down, all describing the same thing. A neighbor who watched them, always from a 2nd floor window, always between 10 p.m. and midnight, always completely still. But here's where it gets worse. The watchers weren't always in the same house. The posts described different addresses. Number 47, number 32, number 19. The watcher would be in one house for a few years, then suddenly appear in another. No one ever saw them move. The previous house would just become empty, abandoned, and the breathing. Others had heard it too. One post described following the sound to a basement and finding 12 people standing in a circle, breathing in unison, eyes closed. When they opened their eyes, they all turned to look at the poster at the exact same moment. That person moved out the next day. I started recognizing usernames from the forum. These people still lived in Willowbrook. We were all here, all keeping this secret, all too afraid to leave because, and this is the part that terrifies me most, people who left reported being followed. The Watcher would appear in their new neighborhood. Different house, different face, but the same behavior, the same window, the same hours. I reached out to a user named Third House Down. Turned out she lived 6 blocks away. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Both of us too paranoid to meet in the neighborhood. She'd been dealing with her Watcher for 3 years. She told me they weren't always alone in the windows. Sometimes there were 2 figures, sometimes more. She'd counted 7 once, all standing perfectly still, all facing her house. She showed me photos she'd taken. In every single one, the window appeared empty, but she swore they were there when she took them. We compared notes, the breathing sounds, the empty houses, the way pets would refuse to walk past certain homes, the way children would cross the street to avoid them without being told. Then she told me about the basement. Every house that had harbored a Watcher had a basement with a weird room. Sometimes it was behind a false wall. Sometimes it was just a door that had been painted over, but always the same size, always with strange markings on the floor, always with that smell, like ozone and old pennies. I went home and checked. Behind my water heater, I found it. A door painted the same color as the concrete. I didn't open it. That night, Mr. Garrett wasn't in his window. For the first time in weeks, the second floor of number 47 was dark. I should have been relieved. Instead, I was terrified. Because at 10 p.m., I heard my doorbell ring. I looked through the peephole. No one there. But on my doorstep was a piece of paper, a printout from the Willowbrook Watchers Forum, my own post from 3 days earlier, asking for help. Someone had circled one sentence in red ink. I need to tell someone about this. At the bottom, in handwriting I didn't recognize, someone had written, "We already know." I looked up at number 47. Every window was full. Every single window had a figure standing in it. All of them facing my house. All of them perfectly still. I packed everything I could fit in my car and left that night. Drove to my sister's place in Michigan. But I know it's not over, because last night she mentioned her neighbor had been acting strange, standing in his window at night, watching her house. And this morning, I found a new post on the Willowbrook Watchers Forum from someone in Michigan, 3 blocks from my sister's house. They're spreading, following those of us who left, creating new clusters in new neighborhoods. I don't know what they want. I don't know what they are. But if you've noticed someone watching your house, always from the same window, always at the same time, you're not imagining it. Check your basement. Look for the door. But whatever you do, don't open it. And don't try to leave. They'll just follow you. The Cursed Locket. We begin with something small, not a place, not a shadow at the end of the hall, not a ghost drifting through an empty room. No, this story belongs to something you could hold in your hand. A locket, silver, heavy, cold to the touch, even when pressed against warm skin. And it has one very simple, very unsettling habit. It refuses to stay closed. The locket was found more than a century ago in 1912. The house it came from had burned to the ground in a single night. Witnesses said the flames rose so quickly, it was as if the fire had been waiting all along. By morning, the home was gone, reduced to a skeleton of charred wood and cracked stone. But among the ruins, one object remained, that locket, unscathed. When the searchers picked it up, the metal was cool, as though it hadn't been touched by the flames at all. Inside was the photograph of a woman, her face pale, her eyes hollow, eyes that didn't simply look out from the picture, but seemed to follow. And here's the strange part. There were no records of her, no name, no family connected to the house. She appeared in no census, no obituary, no diary. The only proof she ever existed was the photograph sealed in that locket, at least sealed for a time, because the clasp was broken, not rusted, not snapped, but broken in such a way that it could never hold. Jeweler after jeweler tried to mend it. Each time their work was flawless. And yet, by midnight, the locket would creak and fall open. Every time. The first recorded owner after the fire was a woman in her 20s. She found the locket in an antique shop, nestled in a tray of trinkets. That night, as she drifted towards sleep, she swore she heard a faint humming, like the sound of someone breathing through the walls. She sat up, searching the room, but it fell silent. When she looked at the locket the next morning, the photograph inside had changed. Not much, just enough to resemble her mother's eyes. Her mother was still alive, but somehow her face was caught behind the glass. The young woman panicked. She returned the locket immediately, refusing even to accept her money back. But the locket had learned her name, and once it knows you, it doesn't forget. Over the decades, it passed from hand to hand. The soldier brought it home after the war. He claimed he heard whispers calling to him in the night, soft at first, then urgent, pressing, until he could no longer sleep. He smashed the photograph with a hammer, but by the next morning, the glass was whole again. The photo was waiting. This time, the face inside was his fiancée. He never wore it again. But weeks later, he found it lying on his nightstand, as though it had never left. A teacher kept it once. She said she could hear her students' voices in the hum, as if they were trapped inside the locket, calling for help. A widower tried to bury it beneath his wife's grave. 2 nights later, it appeared on his dresser, polished, shining, waiting. One man even claimed he threw it into a river, but when he returned home, the locket was dripping wet on his pillow. No matter how far it's cast away, it finds its way back, always and always. It opens at midnight, the faint click of the clasp, followed by silence, then a whisper. No one agrees on what the voice says. Some claim it begs, others swear it laughs, but all of them agree on one thing. The longer you keep it, the clearer it becomes. At first, just a sigh, then words, then your name. And the photograph inside, it changes more and more, until one night, the face staring back at you is someone you love, or worse, someone you'll soon lose. The most disturbing stories are the ones where people claim the locket showed them a face before tragedy struck. One woman said the photo turned into her brother's image. The next day, he drowned. Another said the locket revealed her husband. By morning, he was gone. So the locket doesn't just show who you love, it shows who death is waiting for. And the question is, are you cursed because you keep the locket? Or does the locket simply tell you the truth? No one has been able to keep it long, No museum will accept it. Collectors refuse to display it. And yet, the locket keeps returning. To drawers, to attics, to nightstands. Always the nightstand. Always close enough to reach out and touch. So tonight, before you close your eyes, before your breathing slows, and sleep pulls you under, do one thing for me. Turn your head. Glance at your nightstand. If you see a silver locket resting there, make sure it's closed. And if it isn't, if the clasp has already sprung loose, don't look too long at the photograph inside. Because if you do, it will look back at you. And tomorrow, when you wake, the face inside will be yours. Long silence, then a soft whisper, almost like it's in the listener's ear. Good night, and sleep well.